Welcome to the Deer Society podcast. Here's your host, Brian Lemke.
Yeah, this is who I am. Well, I'm a deer hunting man.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Deer Society podcast. I'm Brian Lemke, joined by JJ Dukart and special guest in the studio today, Mr. Jeremy Moore from HODAG and Dogbone. Jeremy, thanks for making the trip over.
Thank you for having me, guys. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, so we're getting into that time where everybody's getting excited about deer season. It's right around the corner, a little over a month away here in Minnesota, Wisconsin. We were out at the Whitetails from Scratch property this morning, setting up some HODAG licking sticks, the hemp rope, some different things, just kind of walking through with Jeremy some of the technology behind HODAG and some of the things that he does, and then matching that with some of the strategy that we implement here at Deer Society and Whitetails from Scratch. So in this podcast, we're going to be talking about lots of things, scrapes, different tools that can help you enhance those scrapes, get better trail camera photos, and really improve your chances in the stand this fall. So JJ, I'll kind of kick it over to you. You can kind of introduce what we were doing out there on the Whitetails from Scratch property today.
Yeah, kind of first of all, we met Jeremy at ATA, and there's just so much crossover between what you do with your businesses, especially with all the scent involved with your dog training and your dog products, and then now into your HODAG and your scent, scrapes, hemp ropes, things like that, licking sticks. So it made a lot of sense to get you here, really dive into that, a lot of those topics. But today we were out there. Food plots are just kind of coming up. I think, in my opinion, that perfect time to get out there and start making these scrapes. Deer are not, fully committed to going into these food plots quite yet, but they're starting to check them out. We're working dirt. It's just, I think, that perfect time. So we were out there today, picked just a few, just a handful of spots. We're going to go through the Whitetails from Scratch property and really, put a lot more of these products out there over the coming weeks. But, we started out with the hemp system. So maybe you can walk through kind of what that product is and how we used it, and I can kind of chime in on the strategy portion of that too.
Yeah, I think, I enjoyed what we did this morning, because it's like we came over from the farm that we hunt across the river in Wisconsin, and we were doing the exact same stuff. Like, we were food plotting, we were putting in our fall plots. We were there about 3 or 4 weeks ago, kind of getting our cameras going for the year. We don't take ours out hardly ever, but some of the batteries die and that kind of stuff. So about a month ago is when we really started, we call kind of our inventory phase, where we're just getting an idea what deer are on the farm. So when we came over here, we're piggybacking basically what we did at the farm earlier this week. Was we got some of our food plots worked up and planted. We repositioned some of our setups. We put a few new ones in, because we did a couple spots where we did new plots on our farm, and we wanted, so like, I look at our product line, the hemp rope. We call it a hemp scent rope, but it's in conjunction with kind of a scent that we use with it to get it jump started and get the deer to start using it. Licking sticks and licking branches, and they all kind of have their own place, but it's real dependent on your setup and your situation and what nature kind of offers you. So when we set up that hemp scent rope by you, when we walked into that plot, it was perfect. There's this really big branch that hangs way over the center. The plot itself is kind of bottlenecked or kind of hourglass shaped and pinches there, and deer are going to be there. So like I think that one of the things that with all of our products, with all of our HODAG stuff, it's not like it's I think some people mistake with it the idea of it being like an attractant where you're drawing deer from distances. And can it do that? Maybe, but that's not what I use it for. I look at and why I'm excited to see what you guys do with it on your properties is there is a sense of like woodsmanship that's necessary to really make these things work well. And it's no different than, it is the same thing as making mock scrapes. So everyone knows about making mock scrapes. The idea is not new, but if you don't put them in the right spot, they don't work, because they're not gonna like pull deer from long distances away. But if you got deer in general vicinities, which we went into that little plot, it's really kind of like like we call them kind of like micro plots, kill plots. Like, you can shoot almost the whole thing. It's specifically set up like you used what you had there. You had 1 or 2 trees that you maybe could hang a stand in and get away with. and you picked one, you got to stand in it. So what did you do from there? Like that's not negotiable unless you put a blind in there or something. You had one spot to hunt. So from there, you kind of started building out from it. You got that corn plot, you have screening, you're going to put rye, or is that what you think?
Yeah, a little
putting in there?
no-till rye, maybe a little clover, but rye.
Yeah, so you got these nice shaded spots that are pretty secluded, backed by a creek. You got some brushy areas that you're going to bring some equipment in and clear out and push out and kind of, again, create almost fenced out areas where deer aren't going to come in. So like you're taking that, the thing you can't really adjust where your stand is going to be, and then you're building out from it. And so when you looked at that setup, I saw two things. I saw one, you could put a licking stick in the middle of that plot, which would stand out like a sore thumb. It's relatively small. Any deer that walks into it from basically any direction, it's one of the first things they're going to see. Or because you had that really nice, long, big branch that basically hung almost across the whole thing, but it was too high. There was no, you're not going to put you can't have a licking branch on it. So, but we hang that rope down from it. We put the hemp scent rope there, and the hemp scent rope hangs literally at eye level from every direction that they walk in on. So it's like, that's going to stick out. And so when we looked at that, it was like, now you make a scrape underneath it. And so you have scent, you have the scent of the ground being disturbed. You have scent from, Minnesota is a little bit of a weird state. We didn't use the scent today, but there's spots that you can, there's spots that you can't. Everybody's got their own regulations and rules you got to look at. But Wisconsin, we can do it anywhere. But we put this all season scent that we make, which is natural organic compounds. It's not urine. It's not any glands. It's all natural stuff. But it basically like lights that little fire of deer to come and investigate it and touch it. And as soon as they touch it, they're distributing their scent on it, which is what happens in nature. So like we talked about it a couple times, how that woods that we were in or we were backed up to is full of like little scent communication hubs. That's what deer do. And we took away some of the opportunities for them, and we teed it up for them, some really hard to pass opportunities for them to do what they're doing naturally anyway. And then they had that stake to put your camera where you want it. You're not relying necessarily on, you have to find a tree, because you could put your camera where you want it. Well, you face it in a direction where you pick up, in that case, it's the hemp rope, but now you got a way to cover kind of the plot behind it, see direction of which way deer are coming, which way deer are going. And so what we did was, I think we took a good setup, we made it a lot better by being like pretty precise with some details. And so that hemp rope is just one way to make your camera more effective. I love trail cameras. I've gotten to be maybe a little too reliant on trail cameras. I like them. I think they're fun, but they're really valuable information wise. But they're only as good as what you put in front of them. A trail camera can only reach so much and can only cover so much. And when you start talking about areas that are a little bit bigger, I've sat in stands and I've not sat in stands specifically because of trail cameras. I went, this deer is coming here. He's coming here consistently. I've got a nice pattern on him. Based on my trail camera, I'm going to hunt him. I've also not sat in spots because the cameras are dead. No deer in there. Well, the deer are there. They're not far off typically, but I've sat in some stands where I went, man, we got to sit there. So we go and we sit, and that night we see a ton of deer, but they didn't go in front of the camera. Well, it's a little bit bigger plot. And so what I want to do is I want to figure out ways to maximize that one trail camera or two trail cameras or however many trail cameras you have in that area. I want to get the highest percentage of deer that I can to go in front of it, because it really doesn't help me if they don't go in front of it. And even if you get them in front of your cameras, I used to get so frustrated. Remember when they used to have the cameras with the film? This would have been really valuable back then, because I can't tell you how many times I went and checked my roll of film, and it had, it was 36 pictures on the film, and I only had 20. And should I leave it for the next time and no, I'm taking it. I'm going to Walgreens and I'm getting it sped up so I can get it developed and all that. And do you know how many times you get the back end of a deer, or you get a blurry deer at a distance, or it's just, it took a picture, but I don't know what the hell I got. So for me, when you put a deer in front of a camera, and now with video, like we run almost all of our cameras on video, I get information on which direction they're coming from. I get information on which direction they're going. I get every angle of the deer, and they're standing literally like I can't position them any better because I know exactly the distance. My camera takes the best picture at night and daytime. I know exactly where I want them so that, like, there was a couple of our setups where we got the primary thing in front of it, whether it's the hemp rope or the licking stick or the licking branch, but we also took into consideration what's beyond it. And now all of a sudden that one camera is getting the deer right here, but it's also covering potentially stuff in the background. We have a lot of cameras where we'll have a licking stick right in front of the camera. Let's say it's at 5 yards, but I have a hemp rope on the other end of the field or a licking branch on the other end of the field. It might be 30, 40, 50 yards away, and the camera will still pick up deer on it, and I'll end up getting both. So it's a really long-winded answer, but the idea is like, I want to maximize those cameras. I want to get the most out of them, the best pictures and the most of the pictures that I can get. It's just a really easy way to do it, but you got to have them. You got to have them in the right spot to begin with, and that's why I think when we looked at your piece today, that was fun for me because I look at that and we just saw just a snippet of it. But now you guys, I think the whole idea was to just show you some of the easy mistakes probably that people make. Like, because you said it, I think when we were talking about putting in a licking stick, there's some stuff that, again, it's like these fine little details that if you don't do them just quite right, like none of our stuff is very complicated. But when you think about like most of the stuff we do as hunters, none of it's like rocket science. But you can make the right little tweak to it, and it makes all the difference in the world. And so I look at most of the hunting stuff that we do that way now. And, there's overlap in dog stuff. Like dog training is the same way. You make a little mistake. I train a lot. I work with a lot of dogs. And if you do it just a little bit off, it doesn't register. It doesn't, the exchange between me and the dog doesn't happen. But you tweak it a little bit, and all of a sudden it clicks. And so I think it's a thing that we have to pay attention to, some of those fine little details. That was what was kind of fun about doing it on your pros.
Yeah, so we hung the 3 different products in three different spots. How do you feel like deer react to the different ones, like the licking stick, licking branch, hemp scent rope? Like, what's the difference? Like,
yeah,
obviously they fit each spot different on
right.
how kind of we used them strategy wise, but how do the deer interact with that?
Yeah, you're right. Communal hubs. I mean, they're all scent hubs, but I do think they're different. And when we talked about it at the end, we did the licking branch last. And so me personally, this is just my experience. I get on our properties probably the least amount of year-round action on licking branches, but they're really good. They can be some of our best setups in certain windows of time. And typically it's, once the bucks are making scrapes in the woods, which you read about it, you hear about it, and I believe it, but I don't believe it to the degree that people think. Deer use scrapes year round. You hear people talk about that all the time. Yeah, I think they do, but not the same way. And so I see, we have certain spots on our farm. The farm that we hunt now in Buffalo County is like, I think this is our 8th or 9th year on it. And so over the years, we've gotten to know some habits of these deer. And there's one field edge that will be the first scrape of the year. It always is. It's always on that edge of this particular field. We call it the Southwest Plot, but that's where it'll start. And we'll get scrapes there as early as probably maybe early September, but probably like mid-September, they'll start opening up the ground. There's licking branches there that are typically there year-round because they're live trees and they're in the right spot and they're at the right height. But they'll start opening up that ground pretty consistently about mid-September. And so from then till I see it into like mid-October. Like there's about a 4-week window where it's like you go in the woods, every time you go, there's a new scrape, like, or the scrapes are freshened, And when you find a hot one, you can't beat it. Like put a camera on it and you're going to have just about every buck around is going to come to it. So what I see is this window of time with licking branches. because we're making scrapes underneath them. They can be really powerful, but like now I don't get nearly the pictures and videos on it that I'll get on a licking stick. So if I put a licking stick out, and the licking stick is a confusing one for people because I think we're all accustomed to rubs on trees, and that's another visual thing. And I think it's a very seasonal thing, centered around the rut and pre-rut. But the licking stick is not a rubbing thing. They'll rub on it for sure. Like a lot, I would say 75% of ours get rubbed up. Almost all of them get scrapes made next to them at some point throughout the season. But what's interesting is, so we put some out in new plots that we had planted earlier this week. And they're on big bluff tops, and it's 10 plus acres, and we probably have about 2 or 3 acres of that 10 put into beans. So we tilled some of those beans under. Like the beans are getting browsed off. I know there's a lot of deer in them eating, but we tilled up probably a 40 yard by 40 yard square within bow range of one of our blinds that's covering those beans, and we put it in a spot so that we could see it from another blind, and we put some brassicas in, we put some oats in, and we put some soybeans in it. And so we put a licking stick in the middle of it, and within, like I could have put a camera on those beans. There's 2 acres of beans there, at least. I could have put a camera there. Well, I wouldn't even put one there because I might get a deer to walk past it, but there's really no reason for them to be in front of it when they have all these beans to browse through. But now we tilled that little square up in it, and we put a licking stick in the middle of the square. Well, that's like Mike's green, right? And there's the flagpole right in the middle of it. Well, what do your eyes do when you look down the fairway? You look at the green and you see the flag. When you look into that beans, you see the green because now it's brown and it smells. They love that fresh dirt. So that smells funny to them. We've been in there disturbing it. We put this little stick in there, and it comes back to that, we were talking earlier in the field about if someone came into your yard and planted a tree, you'd notice it like instantly. You'd go check it out. Well, why is that tree all of a sudden in my yard? It didn't grow. It couldn't have grown overnight. How did that happen? Well, that's one analogy, but really what it is like you're putting it in their living room. It's not even in the yard. It's in the living room. So if you woke up and you saw a tree in your living room, you're going, who the hell put the tree in the living room? So I do think that they're real curious animals. I think everyone has their own thoughts, and some of the people that are listening to this will say I'm nuts, but it been able to do it long enough that I don't worry about it. We hunt on a pretty working farm. Like there's traffic, like farmers going in and out with trucks and 4-wheelers. And the guy who owns the farm that we hunt with, friends of ours, he takes rides, and they went on a hay ride the other weekend and took the whole family up along the bluff, and like they ride horses, and so there's activity on the farm. It's a working farm. It's not like it's a desert. It's not like it's this thing that never gets action on it. So we move around on it, and I think the deer adjust and adapt to that. I actually think that when we start doing stuff on the farm like this, I call it like shuffling the deck. Like it changes some patterns of deer, and like we'll end up getting way better pictures on our cameras and a lot more of them for the first 3 or 4 days after we go to the farm and screw around for 2-3 days. And I don't think especially now, I'm not saying go there if you're hunting in late October and you're going to hunt November, or you're hunting early season in mid-September. I'm not saying go there and create a whole bunch of stuff the week before the season. But here's what I think is funny is I think, like the idea of lulls, you hear about October lulls, and everyone talks about the October lull. I think it's so man-made and so created that if you look at the amount of pressure, like we come out every 3-4 weeks to the farm, buzz around, check the stands. I was shop vacuuming out blinds, and we're doing all this odds and ends stuff. But we're doing it in little doses, and then we come through this season, and we're going to come into hunting season. Well, my deer, when we left, those deer are coming to that licking stick because they're curious as to what the hell are these guys doing now? And there's that tree in my yard. I got to go see it. So they go over and they look at it and they go, wow, man, look at this fresh dirt. I think it feels good in their hooves. I honestly think that because I see them running around in that fresh tilled dirt and playing with each other, chasing each other. And it's like a beach for them or something. So they're comfortable there. Then they go over and they see that stick and they go, they're looking at it with their nose and they're going, damn, that smells good. So now they go over to it and they're checking it out and they're going, well, how did we put a maple in a spot that the deer can't reach maple on your plot. So now you go over and they go, oh, maple. And if they like it, they go over it and they touch it and they smell it. And so there's 4 glands on that deer's face. And one of those 4 are touching that no matter what. As soon as they touched it, they left their scent there. So now all of a sudden the next deer comes and goes, Sue from the back 40 was here. So now they go over there and they touch it. And they left their scent. And they touch it and they left their scent. And it's this big snowball effect. Well, now all of a sudden we just did what they've been doing in the woods. Because those communal scent hubs are everywhere. But we did it where we wanted it. And as long as we can get them to start it, they'll take care of the rest, which is the beauty of it for me, because now I don't have to go there regularly to keep deer coming to that spot. I let the deer do it. So we're really just kind of tapping into what they're doing naturally, but making them do it where we want. When I say making it, like we kind of are, like we're kind of shaping their behavior. Like we're getting them to, we're kind of, I don't know what the right word is. We're shaping how and when and where we want them to do it. And that's why, like when we talked about when we were out on your farm, like one of the things I wanted to do was like explain where, why, and how. Like that's important, because if you put this in the wrong spot, if you put this where deer aren't, like I do get some people that are like, I just can't get big deer to come to it. I'm just not getting those big deer. And I go, well, how many big deer do you have on camera elsewhere? Well, we don't have any big deer. Well, it doesn't make the deer big. It doesn't make them old. Like they have to be there, and you have to have those to begin with. But if you have them, I just really think it gives me a way higher percentage of what I would call quality info on them.
Well, and we had so much history, or not so much history, but at least a couple of years of history on these spots and how the deer walk through there. Sure. And where we put the hemp rope, there was, like I said, out in the field, there was a branch hanging down kind of loosely, so they knew about that spot.
Right.
Now we went in, you thought it was a good spot for hemp rope when I showed it to you, and we just basically, took away competition.
Yep.
We're going to do some stuff with the corn.
Yeah.
No-till, so we're just sweetening up those spots. And then you go over to the bat blind, and the objective there was to bring deer in closer, because last year, basically every time we went out and filmed, the deer filter into the plot, they're hitting all the scrapes on that back edge 70, 80 yards away. Well, we can't shoot that far. Great footage. That doesn't do us any good other than, some cool social media content. But, pulling them in with that licking stick. And then also, the other strategy we had in the back there, at least, getting some intel from that. So there's just a big hunting strategy that we really pulled into that, using your expertise on the product, how to pull them in, what they like, and just try to put that together. I think we had a pretty deadly combination out there.
Yeah, it's funny listening to you talk. There's a million things that I want to touch on there. But first, real quick story, you talk about making your trail camera more efficient, getting better pictures and better quality, and how you pay attention to details and you can be just a little bit off. So, just as well, almost as I do, in Tom Inderbo, he's a great example of this. I remember working for him back in the day, would go and set up a trail camera. Well, he was setting up one trail camera, one right next to it facing the other way, another one facing the other way. Like he would set up 5 trail cameras in this little area. And it was amazing to see the different pictures that he would get on different cameras, just facing different directions or one trail off. Now, who really, in all reality these days, has the ability to go and spend, tons of money and put 5 trail cameras out and all next to each other? It comes down to that efficiency thing, getting the deer where you want them and being able to set up that one trail camera correctly, so you're getting the most efficient bang for your buck with that. So, moving on from there, I think that one of the things that was really interesting today when we're out there and looking back at it now, we all think of scrapes and mock scrapes and these different things as scent communication hubs, right? But the big takeaway for me today was when you set these things up and you really look at them from the big picture, they stand out. They're as much, I don't want to say as much of a visual thing as a scent thing, but there's definitely a presence when you walk into one of these food plots. It's not like, to your point, you don't want to just go and hang a hemp rope up, where there's a lot of other things there, or put a licking branch next to a scrape where they can access that too. Like the spots that we set up today were very visual. They were very visual to us, therefore being very visual to the deer. So that, and like you said, they go over there, they start to put their scent on, and boom, it takes off from there and kind of spirals. Right. Now, my question to you is, so the hemp rope, why hemp?
Yeah, so it makes it, I think, again, back in these fine details things. So first off, you look at the construction of hemp. So hemp is a natural fiber. So it is naturally absorbent. It actually it holds scent very well, where certain materials don't. So like a poly type rope won't hold and absorb, and literally it saturates and wicks, if you will. So the hemp fibers hold it. So that's when we think of what's the purpose of the idea of this. It's to have deer put their glands on it. It's how they communicate. So we want that stuff. So it doubles for me as if you're going to use scent on it, to jumpstart that interaction. We call our stuff all season scent, but it literally soaks it up and holds it. So that's part of the material process. Now, cotton will do the same thing, and you can get cotton ropes. The problem with cotton is cotton breaks down. So that hemp rope is used for certain things worldwide for different industries. And that's why I'm in the US. So our hemp rope is actually sourced here in the US. It's only been able to do that in the last 12, 18 months. Before you couldn't get it. You couldn't source it here. They couldn't make it here in the States. Our stuff is made in the States now. We used to import it. And so when we would import it, worldwide, the hemp market there's all sorts of stuff, fabrics, and there's all sorts of stuff they're doing with it. But there's big ropes that they use for nautical stuff, like tying off giant ships and stuff, is oftentimes hemp rope because it's so durable. It doesn't break down in the elements. So rain, sunlight, none of that stuff breaks down. If you take a cotton rope and you hang it out, it'll work that year, but it's probably going to break down and you'll have to replace it. Well, when you get one we looked at that scrape, like you said, I think your words were, I want to smell that stick because that's an overhanging licking branch. And I know a lot of booners that licked on it and smelled it. And I want to see because the year after year after year, it's perennial. They'll use, look at some of the rubs that are out in the woods where you see these old scarred up trees, and then they get fresh rubbed the next year, and then they get fresh rubbed the next year, and there's these battle wounds of scars on them. I want that. That's something that generationally has been used. So deer, if I can get a hemp rope working and getting deer to put, I want to leave it forever if I can. Well, hemp will do it. Hemp will last that long. So it for me, it's the durability part of it. It's the functionality part of it with being really absorbent of scent. And so it's not as cheap as they make ropes out of all sorts of fibers now. But this is what and does it the natural part? I'm not a hippie granola guy, but I do think that the idea of kind of a hippie, but my wife thinks I'm cool that way. But it's natural, and I do think that deer and animals in general, natural stuff, I think has some advantages to it. As far as no chemical interference. Now, can I prove that? No, I can't. But I'll tell you right now, I've had better results with it. So that's the primary reasons why we're going with that. And functionality wise, it provides what we think is the best performance.
So kind of a follow-up question there, you have for example, the three products we set out today, the licking stick, the hemp rope, and the licking branch. The licking stick, that's one that stands out. You can put that thing virtually anywhere, put it in the middle of a food plot where you have not a tree around, right? So let's talk about a scenario where you do have trees around and somebody's out there and they're saying, okay, well, this is a great spot for a mock scrape. And they're looking to put a licking branch versus the hemp rope,
Yeah.
right? So would you say that that's more of a scenario based on what they have access for overhanging branches, or is there one that you'd recommend over the other, or what situations would you use one over the other?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So I want to minimize the chances for the deer to use the wrong thing. So like if you find a great scrape that all the deer with a licking branch and all the deer are using it, if it works good for my camera and it works good for my stand or blind, why mess with it? Like that's the ticket. But how often is the best scrape in the best spot? It's not. Like you had great overhanging licking branch stuff too far away from your stand. So what I like to do is I want to again, stack the deck in my favor a little bit. So I'm going to eliminate stuff that doesn't work. If it's natural or not, I'm going to eliminate it. So trimming back, how many things do we trim back off those plots? Like take away the chance for them to go and establish it there and ask them to do it here, offer it to them, and they'll typically take it as long as you put it in the right spot. So I like it in a couple different scenarios. When you've got a real mature woods, most times a mature woods is like a park. You can see through it. There's no low stuff. If you got certain types of trees, oaks are real famous for this. As they get bigger, the branches die off low and you don't have any branch. So we have some food plots that have their big oaks in the middle. They're acorn, they're going to give us acorns every so many years. And so we don't necessarily get rid of them. They're big, valuable trees. And so we're not getting rid of those trees. If we've got some junk, elm, or we got that stuff, we're dozing that off and making our plot bigger. But these big oaks we're leaving. Well, these big oaks stand in the middle of, we have a couple of examples where they stand in the middle of the food plot and there's not a branch for 50 feet. I mean, so when you look into that food plot, you go, boy, if there was the perfect height branch or a licking branch and a scrape underneath it, every deer that's coming into that food plot, whether they come in from the north, south, east, or west, when they get into it, there's the spot. Like it's gonna be absolutely perfect. So those are scenarios where, in my business partner Scott's got some real big. He's in kind of southwest part of Wisconsin, and it's real sandy soil, and they got a lot of oaks, and they've got some big sections of woods that are just big oak parks, basically. Well, the deer take these logging trails through them. They don't spend much time in there, but they come from some swampy areas and they work through these big oak flats out to egg fields. And so what he does is the deer walk the logging roads by him. Like they're on their primary trails are on those logging roads. And so he's got some big oaks that he'll hang a branch right out over the logging road at the perfect height. Well, the deer coming through there, and it's this beaming light that shines on we call it the lighthouse effect. It's like you can't miss it. And so when you tee it up for them at the right height, and there's no other choice for them, and you just said, here, why don't you let everybody know this is your spot? So to me, those are really good scenarios for licking branches. And I think the key with the licking branch for us is, so all of our stuff is kind of built around the spring technology, the spring idea. I call it technology. It's a spring. And this, you had mentioned it earlier, like our stuff is super simple, but I feel like it's real logical. Like it's kind of common sensey. So when you look at natural licking branches off of a tree, like we've got videos, and you can Google licking branch or scrape, any type of scrape stuff on YouTube and watch videos. I mean, you guys, how many times have you filmed bucks thrashing overhanging licking branches? I think they're frustrated at certain times of the year. They're shredding it, and they're just pissed. And they are raking. And when you have an actual branch coming off the tree, it's green. It's alive. It's got a lot of moisture. It's green. And so you can pull it. You can't even break them off half the time. Try to go breaking off a branch that's green. It's hard to. You break it, it won't break. It snaps back. It comes back. It's very spring-like, right? So when those deer get on those and rake them, they just bounce back. They bounce back. Well, if you took, as soon as we cut the branch off or the tree or whatever we're using, we killed it. It's going to dry. It'll be springy for a little while, but it's going to dry very quickly, and it's going to become very brittle. So all of a sudden, that nature's spring is gone, and it becomes, if you fasten it rigid, they'll break it. If they use it the way we want them to, they're going to break it. So both our licking stick and our licking branch, we have this. It's I think a lot of value brings the idea of, it's basically a spring mounted holder. And so it takes the pressure, not only of the deer, but like the wind and all the elements. I mean, we have videos of bears coming up to our, depending on where you're at, we have spots where there's bear, and the bear will come up and they're curious of this licking stick or this licking branch that all of a sudden appeared overnight. And the scent has got them intrigued. So they come over and they level it, knock it over, lock it over, and all of a sudden it springs right back up. When they're done with it, it springs right back up. So I think that's a value that the design brings, that it's a durability thing. It'll last. We put them right in the middle of our logging road. Like a licking stick, I'll put it right in the middle of the logging road. And if it's tight and I can't drive around it, I just drive over the top of it, my UTV, and all of a sudden, it bounces right back up. So it's going to take a lot of abuse, that's the idea. We put it out there to get beat up. But if without that spring, you might get action, and then all of a sudden it gets knocked over or broken, and it's laying flat on the ground, and they won't touch it. But once it's laying flat on the ground, they're not going to touch it anymore, because it's not doing what it's not what it looks like in nature.
Yeah, I got a spot in mind right now, and I think I showed it to you when we were planting the other day, up at the power line, where I said, there's all these dead sticks coming on. I said, see this little parachute, string? That was me last year tying a bunch of branches on, because they all kept breaking off and they were dry and brittle, and tried my best to keep that scrape active, because it was in this awesome pinch point. Camera's always active, right by the stand. So in my mind, we didn't go out there today, but that was like the next one that I want to hit. Sure. Is like clean up all the dead stuff, put that system on there. Nice spring. That's going to be a hot one too. So yeah, I have plenty of experience with, dead branches just not working, and that spring system is going to be sweet.
They'll work for only so long, and then that's frustrating, because you work so hard to get them to use it, right? Like the branch that we replaced, basically, we took a natural licking branch that the deer had established, but it wasn't big. Like you brought up, that was something I was thinking about. You brought up, these are visual and they really stand out. They do, but they're not that big. And I made a point of telling you guys, like, I think one of the biggest issues people have is they have this idea that bigger's better with everything. I mean, we're guilty of that. We will want more and bigger everything. And sometimes it's just not the case. A lot of times that's not the case. In nature, it's definitely not the case. So when a licking stick for deer, which deer use them on their own, they establish them there on their own, it's never more than 3/4 of an inch to an inch in diameter, and it's typically not taller than like 48 inches. Like it's chest level down, and a lot of times they're broken off at the tip and hanging down, so it's like at nose level for that deer. So they don't stand out. They're not real visually like, oh man, that's beaming to me in the woods. They blend in pretty good. But to get them to want to turn this into that, I do want it to stand out. So that's this idea of like, cheat the system a little bit, make it look like a sore thumb to get them to start using it. And then once they start using it, let them take it over and let them think it's a real deal. Let them think it's and it is a real tree. I mean, we cut a black walnut, cut a maple. I mean, I use all sorts of trees. And this is something that all of these products, like everything, I think, they're not magic. Like there's no silver bullet stuff out there. These are little tricks and ways to get the most out of what we're doing from a hunting standpoint and preparing for hunting, I suppose. But like, I've put a lot of them out that didn't get action. So why? Well, there could be a variety of reasons. It might be the wrong type of tree. They just don't want to use that type of tree. I've switched 3-4 different types of trees, and then the 5th one it worked, and they loved it for whatever reason. I've heard tons of stories about that. There's times where we might not realize it, but I get this a lot where folks, this isn't working. Send me a picture. Like, I'll help anybody. I want these to work for people. I know they work, but you got to have them set up properly. So send me a picture so I can have a little bit better understanding. Well, I get a picture and here it is next to a big feeder. And I go, well, why do you think the deer are there? They're not there to communicate on a licking stick. They're there because there's a pile of corn or there's a feeder going on. So the scent hub, the communal scent hub, that's not what they're there for. So I've also had some people put it close to feeders and it works really well. So there's no set rules. There's no like black and white. This is the way you do it. Like you have to be creative. Like think about how many times you've tried something, didn't work. Tried something, didn't work. Tried something, didn't work. And all of a sudden it worked because you tweaked it and you tweaked it and you tweaked it. And sometimes you just have to be patient. I have some that I put out that I know they're going to work. I have one behind my house. I'll get bucks on it. I know I'll get a couple nice bucks on it this year. And I don't have that many big deer by my house, but I'll get a few. But they probably won't show up until mid-October because they don't live there. I got 2 or 3 does that fawn close to my house every year. They're like little residents, and they'll use them. I'll put them out in my little food plots behind my place, and they'll use them. But I won't get any bucks. But I know the deer are using them, and I know the few deer that are there are using them, and that's important. So I just have to be patient. My nephew is the same. He's in northern Wisconsin, and he's got some does that live by him, and he'll get does and does and does. I say, "You get any bucks? No. You get any bucks? No." And then all of a sudden, like end of October, first week in November, his window is very short up there, but he'll get like 2 weeks where he'll go 6 different bucks this week. Well, like that makes his season. Like he loves that stuff. So you can't, like, it's not going to be this like shift, 100% shift in your hunting. It's just like an accessory to what you have. So, but when you, like with you guys, if you look at your property, look at all the little tweaks you've done in the last 3 years on it. Like, and then you learn a little bit more and you do something else the next year. You do a little bit more and you adjust it, and you're constantly like fine tuning stuff. Well, I don't care if you're starting out with it in the beginning, real raw, or if you've had something and you've got it dialed right in. Like there's always little things you can do. And for some people, this is a big thing. Like, you know, so I know a lot of people that, and myself included, like I've struggled with I've been doing this with licking sticks. It was the first one that we really kind of patented, and 11 or 12, this is like the 12th year. So I went a long time with small food plots and just struggled to get consistent deer on it. You know, like I knew they were there, but I wasn't getting very good pictures. I wasn't getting very good videos. But I've done it long enough now, and that's what I don't do a really good job of, is like sharing some of those stories of how I struggled with it. I mean, I made a lot of it. I shouldn't say they're mistakes, but they just didn't work. Well, it wasn't my fault. It wasn't the deer's fault. It just wasn't what they wanted. So you do have to be creative at times. I think you have to be patient at times. But that probably gets applied to a lot of things.
Yeah, one last question that I have for you when it comes to scrapes kind of is, you know, you hear a lot of people talk about vertically hanging branches or vertically hanging things for scrapes or mock scrapes. Do you think that have you seen that there's really any validity to, in your experience, something that's vertically hanging like a hemp rope versus a licking branch?
So, no, I think that the deer use them all. And so I look at it as it's all situational. And quite honestly, it really doesn't matter what I think. It matters what they think. So, you know, we put within a relatively small space, and I have lots of plots that are like this, where I've got a variety of stuff within 50 yards of each other. It's a question we get asked a lot. Well, how many per acre, or how many per 40, or how many of this? There is no answer to that. We're hunting on a farm that's 600 acres, and I would say 75% of our things, cameras with HODAG items in front of them, are on probably 30% of that acreage, because 70% of it is either left alone. We don't do anything in there. We don't hunt in it. We don't food plot in it. It's just woods or cover. But then there's these prime areas where I load stuff up. There was a buck that we killed a couple years ago that we charted it out. We put it onto like OnX, and then we dropped all these pins of where the things were, where the licking sticks were, where the licking branches were, where our cameras were. And then we went through, and this is the nerdy part about it, where you can look at your history on all these trail cameras. And we found every video that we had or picture of that deer, and then we'd make a dot, and we'd make a dot, and we'd make a dot. And then we looked at, as we scattered that out, that deer spent 90% of the time where we had him on camera, it was within 23 acres of the 600-acre farm. He would go out a little bit at times, and it was like during a 2-week window over the 3 years that we were doing this. But he'd get out of that little core zone, but he was really tight. My son ended up killing him, but it was like for us, I'll load certain areas up with stuff because I look at it and I go, I'll do anything I can to get a little bit of an edge. I mean, they're pretty smart, so I wanted an advantage. So I don't know that there's a difference, and I don't know that it matters. What matters is what they like. So give them a smorgasbord and let them pick. You know, vertical versus horizontal is a question I've thought a lot about. I've never had much luck horizontal anything. I've seen some people do it, but it's never worked for me. But I look at it as personal experience of my own. That's the most valuable I got, you know, and I look at it and I go, those are really natural things. Deer, you know, vines that hang down. The vine's in the right spot, they'll use it. But if it's in the wrong spot, they're not going to use it. So that's where we can kind of manipulate them a little bit.
Well, my phone just buzzed, and a fawn is at the hemp rope, so they're starting to use it.
See? Sometimes it happens that quick, seriously, and sometimes it takes a while.
That's awesome. That's
But
crazy.
pretty much everything, and that's why I like talking to you about this and what we had some good conversations at ATA, but everything we've done with Illusion, it's all just a big testing ground.
Sure.
From, Mike inventing deer calls and learning the language to the scent control aspect with phase. I mean, if it doesn't work in the field, then, we're not going to tell people to do it or sell products that don't work. So, just everything we do is all about testing. Whitetails from scratch, 100% testing, habitat, food plot seed, the seed we're putting in.
Right.
I mean, you saw how we were splitting up different quadrants with see what the deer like. I mean,
Right.
That's what it's all about. So, putting these products out, we're going to give them a good test. Obviously, they're already using them, but I think it's just interesting for learning, and we're going to put different tactics to the products and to the use than even you are. I was thinking, why can't we try a decoy out there with that licking stick and pull them in? There's just so many things you can do calling. So it's all fun.
Yeah, there'll be twists, and that's why I was excited. We've talked about, God, there's so many similarities and overlappings with the different things we do with our small business, with what you guys are doing with your business. And I look at it and I go, it's interesting to see what other people come up with, because there's great ideas of how to use things just a little bit differently. And we have similar farms, like our setups are similar, but they're different. You know where we are because we're down by Tom. I saw Tom the other night. We saw him the other night glassing velvets. So Tom's lease butts up to one of ours. So, but there's differences between that Buffalo County stuff and over here and back by me on the east side of the state and in the Northwoods. But these things, deer are deer. Like, I don't care where you are. Deer are deer. And there is a certain parts about them that don't change. How they communicate, how they use scent, that doesn't change. How they do it might change a little bit, but like the idea that they use that, it's in them. It's part of their makeup.
Yeah, and that's what it's all about. I mean, that's what, like you said, you guys we've all built our foundation on these things that, they're great tools to stack the odds in your favor. Now, there's a lot of strategy that goes into how those tools are being applied, for sure, and that's part of why we're here and why we're doing this and why we give, do podcasts and give information. It's, we're talking to you about tools that we've had great success with, but we want to give you more than that and tell you how we've had success with them, because in the end, like you said, Jeremy, we want you to be successful too, So building off of this whole thing and talking about small business and how, the foundation of that, HODAG is just a part of what you do. So, another big part of what you do is dog bone, and dealing with dogs. And I know that you and JJ had some conversations at ATA, and talked about some different scent, things that are similar between dogs and deer. So let's kind of get into that side of things, the dog bone side of things and that kind of entity of your business.
Yeah. Well, so you're right. Like, as a small business for us, that's HODAG is a nice part of it. Dog bone's a nice part of it, but it's like it's two passions of mine. Like, I love deer. Like, I really love deer, but I'm a big dog guy. Like, I'm really into dogs and training dogs, hunting dogs. And so for us, that's for me personally, it's like the perfect world. I mix in, the things I really love. And JJ, you and I talked a lot about not only some of the, there are direct connections to dogs and deer tracking. Minnesota is legal now. We work with the United Blood Trackers and have worked with them over the years, and they've made a great push for making tracking dogs legal in a lot of states, and they're very efficient game finding tools. Like, I think as a hunter, it's maybe one of the most valuable things we have. We certainly know it as upland hunters and gun dog guys, the value of a retriever. Well, with big game, I think it's the same. So, it allows me to like get my mind engaged in both kind of aspects of it. And from a business standpoint, it works really well for us because I get to think about shit I love all the time.
Well, yeah, it was just so interesting because you kind of live in those two worlds. We live in whitetail world only. I don't even have a dog, but the aspects of, dogs and how they use scent and how you're training and how dogs are thinking. And I was just trying to pick your brain as much as I could at ATA about that, trying to relate it back to deer because their sense of smell is, one of the top, if not the top sense that they have. And then what we do with the scent control side. So just trying to unpack all that with you, it's been pretty invaluable. But some of the interesting things that I was excited to hear about when you were talking about some of the dog stuff, and in the back of my mind, I was thinking scent control for deer, but you were talking about dogs tracking deer and what they're looking for. Most people probably think, oh, they're just, going for blood, there's the blood trail, but the adrenaline that a deer puts off when they're hit, the dander, some of those things, it was interesting because, what we try to do with phase, especially on the dander side, not so much on the adrenaline side quite yet with people, but we're trying to conceal that dander, basically remove the human odor, and it was just interesting. Maybe you can break down kind of what dogs are trying to smell, and we'll try to relate it back to what deer could potentially be trying to smell and sense for danger.
Yeah, I think there's when it comes to tracking stuff, so we have a line of products that we have for training dogs for tracking. Game recovery. We used to call it game recovery, now call it blood trailing because people it was confusing a little to people, and we call it blood trailing. Well, it's a little deceptive because blood trailing, like, that's not necessarily what our dogs are doing. Like, blood, if there was blood, I don't need the dog. Like, it's a simplicity of understanding, like, where does the dog come into this when it comes to game finding, and really, I need them when I don't have the blood. Now, there's never, I don't think, you shoot a deer very rarely, if it's mortally wounded, let's say, because there's a difference. Like, there's a lot of times it's a reality of hunting and it's unfortunate, but it is a reality. And I don't want to sugarcoat stuff. Like, I want to be upfront and honest. Like, every deer that's shot by a hunter doesn't get recovered. You want to talk about feeling sick. Any hunter knows it. And so the idea but it's also a testament to the toughness of a deer. Like, deer are tough. Like, and think about it. It's their will to survive and live. Like, I oftentimes think, like, I cut my finger the other day. I was baiting bear and I cut my finger and I thought, my God, I'm going to bleed out here in the woods. Like, I'm not sure I'm going to make her out of here. But there are times where I feel like if what happened to an animal happened to a person, we'd lay down and die because we're just really weak and they are extremely tough. And so, but I also thought about it and I went, I don't know though, if it were my if it were life and death, literally, like I probably am going to fight a lot harder than I think I got in me, because like nature would take over and I wouldn't be such a weakling, like I gotta watch what I say, but so I think that understanding that part of it is important. Well, then you start breaking it down and going, all right, so I'm going to use the dog as a tool to find it. Well, the blood, deer don't bleed out. Like they don't spill enough blood to die. Like that's not what happens. There's a lot of stuff that goes on inside of them, right? And so and there are times when you shoot an animal and it's not going to leave this red carpet. It's not doing that. And so, but it may very well be a good shot even. Like I've shot deer well placed shot. Deer didn't go very far and it didn't bleed or bled very little. And so that can be challenging. If you're a woodsman, it can be challenging. If you're not a woodsman, it can be really challenging. Like it could be a matter of you need to be lucky to find it. So I hate to think that that's how it is, but it's true. And so that's where these dogs become so valuable and so efficient. Like, I worked for an outfitter, a really good friend of mine, and I trained a dog for him. And I don't know how many deer she's recovered over the years, lots. Scouty, Scout. So that dog became a tool. And the way I saw it when I was working there and helping with them was like certain times of the year, a lot of deer get shot, right? If you're a tracker, your phone doesn't stop ringing from about the last week of October to the second week of November, because there's just so many hunters in the woods and there's so many deer that are getting shot. Like it's a very busy time. So as an outfitter, my buddy would have people hunting through those time periods. Well, someone shoots a deer and maybe it's a good shot, maybe it's not a good shot, maybe there's a lot of sign, maybe there's not a lot of sign. We took that dog in on every one of them and she recovered every one of them. And what was great about it is we would put her down on that track and she'd take us right to it. Like, I mean, it took a matter. We could go hundreds of yards in the woods and we're there. Like, it's a matter of minutes. We're to the deer and we're out of there. And so I looked at that and I went, well, would we have found that without the dog? Yeah, probably. Would it have been a lot harder? Yeah, I've tracked a lot of deer in my life, and you're down on your hands and knees and you can't find it. So you're marking the last spot and then you're making circles until someone finds blood. And it's this hopscotch thing from spot to spot to spot until you find the deer. It all of a sudden, if depending on all these conditions, an hour can go past pretty quick, and you can go the wrong way 30, 40 yards and have to start over and then go the other way. And so when you look at the amount of pressure all of a sudden you've put into your woods during some really prime time, like, God, that's hard to, like, I was talking about going in the woods and setting up in June and July and August and not being so worried about pressure. Well, I don't want to do that in late October. I don't want to make a drive to the neighbor who's hunting. So I look at the efficiency of these dogs and it just blows my mind. But when you get back to like the science of it, if there's no blood, it makes it very hard for us. I don't think blood has anything to do with them finding it. Like, there's so many other scent clues. So mortally wounded deer put off unique scents. Non-mortally wounded deer put off unique scents as well. I do believe that a well-seasoned dog that's been on a lot of tracks can tell the difference. I've seen it. But there's all these other clues that we talked about where it's like, when I take my dog to the vet, it becomes uncomfortable. Like, I'm uncomfortable. Walk into a clinic, they clam up, their toes get, their nails all of a sudden are sliding. And, if you bring your dog to the vet, you realize quickly it can turn into not such a positive experience. Well, my dogs, I pride my dogs on, I feed them very very good food. I've worked on a supplement for the last 2.5 years with another company it's a health-based supplement that helps with skin, coat, and nails. Those are side effects of it. Those are symptoms of it. But so anyway, I think my dogs have great coats. Now all of a sudden I go into the vet and I bring them in and put her up on the table. So I pick her up on the table and you look and the dog's just white. It's a black lab. It's got all this dandruff. It looks dry skin. The dog is stressed. And so it is instantly exfoliating. It's becoming dandruff. And so you take dog out, dog calms back down, you don't have that problem anymore. Well, it's stress that creates that. It causes the skin to exfoliate. And so when you put anything under stress, that happens. So I was talking with this cop. He's a canine trainer in New York. Met him at the ATA show years ago. Really nice guy, and helped me a lot better understanding some of the scenting things with dogs, which I'm still trying to figure out. Like I don't know that any of us really know. Like, you can get as nerdy as you want about it, but there is some science stuff that's very clear and understandable, but then there's some stuff that we just don't know, and I don't know that we will. But this guy was telling me about how he trains primarily shepherds and Malinois, I think is what he worked with, but he would use these dogs to track criminals. But he's in New York, like in the city. But he's telling me stories about tracking people that were running through the streets and committed some crimes, and they're trying to catch them, and they're hiding in certain old burnt out buildings, and then they're flushing them out of there and chasing them. And he's training these dogs to track. And I'm going, man, the scenting conditions are horrible. Concrete, things that don't hold scent very well and absorb and keep scent. Tons of contamination type things when you start talking about scent. Like, there's all sorts of distractions, let's call them, where it could be other people, it's vehicles, it's garbage, it's stray cats, it's all this stuff that gets in the way of this tracking. Well, this dog can track it. And he said what they're really doing is, a lot of it is these skin cells off these people that are running away after committing a crime. They're just having this rush of adrenaline, and they're moving themselves through the city, and they're literally leaving flakes of skin behind them because they're stressed out. Like, my dog was at the vet. It's dander. It's skin. It's specific to them. Like, dog smells them. That adrenaline smells. Like, you can smell adrenaline. Like, a dog can smell adrenaline. A dog can smell it. Like, kids that, like, I know some people that do these diabetic alert dogs. They're dogs that are trained to juvenile diabetes is a big problem, and there's kids that can have some major. I'm clearly not a doctor, but there's like big health concerns with it, right? So to be able to understand when these kids are going to have these diabetic reactions, to be able to treat them with whatever it is, insulin wise and all that stuff, like, there's value in the timing of it to know early. Well, the body puts off scent that the dogs can detect when some of these kids are going to have an issue with their diabetes. And so the body emits some type of scent. Dog senses it, detects it. Dogs smell cancer. They use dogs in hospitals to smell cancer. Narcotics. The canine guy was telling me about, like, they can smell such incredible amounts with minimal amounts of scent clues, but it's detectable to them. And so they can be trained to do all this stuff. Well, tracking is really natural. Like, we listened to a bunch of coyotes last night. I mean, if the coyote, and our dogs are descendants of that, if the coyote tracks stuff that he can't catch, he burns calories. If he doesn't replace those calories, he dies. Like, the simplest way is, the bad trackers died. The good trackers, the ones that were good trackers, that were smart, they survived. What do the ones that survived do? They pass their genes on. So dogs today all dogs have this inherent ability to track. I think for us as trainers, it's setting them up. It's giving them opportunities. It's giving them an understanding of what it is we really want them to do, because dogs will do just about anything you want them to do. But if you give them an opportunity, and then for training purposes, for me, it's like understanding what it looks like. Again, I can't get in their heads and like figure out how they're processing certain things, but I can set stuff up in training. Like, I can lay a trail, I can age a trail, I can use certain scent clues, I can break the trail, I can do it in certain scenting conditions, I can do it in all these different variables. If I pay attention to all those details while I do this simulated track, and then I put the dog on it, and I know where I did all this stuff because I made these notes, whether it be literally writing them down or thinking about it. And then I put the dog on it. And then I start to read the dog. And good trainers read their dogs really well. And I think there's this body language thing that is very important for dogs to understand about us and for us to understand about them. Like, you can read deer's body language. You can tell you can tell before they blow if they're going to blow. You can tell by twitches of tails and ears if something is right or wrong. You can tell when they settle down and flick that tail. You can tell when they kind of release and they're not as tense. Well, that's all body language stuff that if you pay close attention to, you can decipher it. Or if you don't pay attention to it, it's just a deer. Well, it's the same with a dog. So this dog can tell me on this track, well, what does it do when it loses the scent? Because they're not like robotic. They're not perfect. They're very much like us, where they get off. They're struggling with something, they make a change, they adjust. If the adjustment works, you see it in them. Oh, he's back on it. He's back on that scent. If it doesn't work, oh, she's confused a little bit. Oh, I feel her pulling on the end of that lead. She's on the track. I have one dog right now that I can close my eyes. I don't even have to look at her. I can just tell by the way I feel on the end of the lead. I use a tracking lead. And if she's pulling with a certain kind of cadence and pressure, she's on it. If it stops and all of a sudden she starts to work in a kind of she's kind of a circular pattern, she'll start moving off and making these little swings. She's not on it. So it's not for me to like help the dog. I think we get in the way as handlers a lot. I think you got to let the dog do what the dog does, but you better pay attention to it, because in training, we know how to overlap it with what actually happened. When you're out tracking, you don't. So like that's when you have to have some confidence in the idea of, well, they do or they don't know what they're doing right now. And experience is really valuable for them and us. Like for me, I'm training a young dog to track. I'm taking it on every deer that we shoot. I don't care if I saw it tip over from the stand, because there's something to be gained out of it, both from the dog's perspective and mine, if you pay attention to it. But like the scent clues themselves, think about it. That guy in New York who's tracking a criminal running through the streets, or a gut shot deer that ran through the woods in the lane in the swamp. Like, what's easier? What's harder? So I really believe that, do you need to train them? Yes. The great trainers and great tracking dogs. I don't know if there's such thing necessarily as just exclusively great tracking dogs or great trackers. I think the great ones are when they're both really good and they work together. Like, you have to have that overlap. It's not so simple to just train a dog to be a tracker and then hand it off. Because if you don't, it'd be like a big backhoe. Like, you had a big excavator. It can do a lot of good stuff. But if you put it in the hands of someone who doesn't know how to run it, like, what good does it do you? But if you've got a very good operator, and you give them something that a piece of junk and doesn't work, how much, you can't get it done that way either. So you got to have that. You line those things up, and that's when it works well.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there, but one thing that you were talking about there too, reading your dog's body language, that's exactly what we're doing when we're calling deer in too. If you're calling to a deer and you can't read its body language and he's on alert and you're calling more, like, you're totally ruining the situation.
I've been pretty guilty of that, my friend. I can show you a video of that. Ben's shaking his head, yes.
I'm assuming dogs have a lot of the same physical, cues that deer do, ears back. I know I don't have a dog, so I don't, have that reading ability, but I have years of experience in just watching footage of people calling in deer.
Yeah.
And just trying to, I can read a deer really, really well now, but using dog is a huge, there's so much crossover there. On the scent part, I just think it's fascinating that dogs track that dander like that. We designed the phase system for the dander control without, even knowing you, talking to you, understanding that concept. So it was just kind of cool to hear that. It kind of reaffirmed what we were doing. It made a lot of sense.
Well, it's reasoning.
Now, we don't want criminals to go out and buy a bunch of phase lotion.
To avoid Rin Tin Tin.
Unless they're going to buy a lot. No.
Yeah,
but,
whole new market.
But it's interesting. I mean, there's just, you have that dog base that it's invaluable. And I just like to pull off that and use that on the deer side as much as I can.
Yeah, well, it's, when you bring that up, like, I feel like there's so much stuff for me. A core of my life is dogs, like professionally, right? Like I love working with dogs. I get so much. I owe the dogs an awful lot because they've given me a lot over the years. But deer are right there next to them. And for me, I think that everything I do with the dogs is really relatable and parallels with stuff that I do with deer or with kids or with family. Or I mean, it's just like there is, and I think that a lot of times we don't recognize in life how a lot of that stuff is connected. Like, reading deer, reading a dog. As a small business, we work with, I don't know, we've got 6, 7, 8 people that I work with. I have to read each one of those. To be a good boss, I better be able to read the people I'm working with, because I need to understand like what motivates, what discourages, like what can I do to make things the best scenario to be able to be maximum production. Like that's pretty important. Well, that's a work thing. I don't know. I'm sure there's podcasts out there, and I'm sure there's like speakers that talk about workplace environment and how to build healthy this and healthy that. I bet you the message isn't that different than how to read my dog. I bet you how I read my dog isn't that different to the paying attention to the details of reading the body language of a deer. Like there's all that stuff that connects. But I think that sometimes we look at it as these compartments and they're big steel cages and there's no overlap. I don't think there's an awful lot of it in a lot of different ways. And I think the more like understanding of the general stuff, the better you can be in the precise, finite, detailed things, like whether it be deer or dogs or whatever.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that because obviously we've worked together quite a bit, and I've had the opportunity to see you do a lot of dog training and film that. And that's one thing that, interestingly enough, I always took away from that. These simplistic, foundational things that really apply so much to just life in general, rather than just the dog. And there, like you said, there's so much precise stuff that goes into all these things. But when it comes down to it, everything that we do starts with, and you're the biggest preacher of it that there is, starts with a foundation. It's these simple things and understanding and looking for cues, and then how to, like you said, make those cues, whether it's a dog or a person or a deer or whatever, do kind of get the reaction that you're looking for. Now, there's a lot that goes into it, but when it comes down to it, it's a really simple foundational thing at the start of it. It's interesting you say that because I always took that away from watching you train dogs.
Yeah. I mean, if you really think about it, you can apply it. Like some of it, you probably maybe got to force it a little bit, but pretty naturally, I think, can be applied. If you're filming something in the oil and gas industry, it has nothing to do with deer, it has nothing to do with dogs. But if you're in a room with some people and you're filming a commercial for them and the guy's very uncomfortable, that you got to look at that and go, this isn't going to work because you're just not comfortable enough. I got to figure out how to get you comfortable. What is it? And so then you adjust. And does that work? And if and all of a sudden you read him, his shoulders settled a little bit, he's going to do just fine now because he's comfortable. And so inside of him, he's probably perspiring. He's probably sweating. His pits are getting wet. Well, what does that do? Creates bacteria. He's starting to stink, like right here in the, And so if you start thinking about like all those little triggers that happen, well, that could apply to a lot of things that we're talking about in this other bubble or this other side of the things, So, yeah, that's what I love about what I do, and I'm admittedly the luckiest guy in the world to do what I do because it's some stuff I really care about and I really like and really enjoy and I get a ton of value out of. But I think that, I used to work in construction and I wish I knew some of the stuff I know now. I mean, everybody says this, I guess, but I probably would have been better at construction because I would have thought outside of this box of like, I just drive nails and pour concrete. Like there was probably a lot of things that I could have applied there that would have made that go a little bit better too.
Well, tons of really great information there. I think it's so cool to dive into these different things. And as you listened, you heard us talk about different tools and that, Jeremy has obviously proven out, throughout the years and with trail cameras and testing. And it's exciting for us to be able to test those in the Whitetails from Scratch property this year and some of our others. That's again what's built the foundation of Deer Society and Illusion and just this big test floor of these products and sharing with you ideas that work. I guess overall summary is, take those tools, use them, and pay attention to the details, though. Pay attention to the strategy, build it around a certain tool is not going to change the way that you hunt. It's not going to get you a big buck. But, hopefully watching these podcasts, watching hunt breakdowns, things like that, you can start to craft kind of your own strategy and apply these tools that can definitely help you be more successful. So Jeremy, thanks again. Guys, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you subscribe. If you haven't done so already, go check out the Deer Society app. It's free. Make sure you download that. Lots of good stuff coming. Hunt breakdowns starting here in just a couple weeks. So lots of great content coming, and good luck out there hunting this fall.
Well, I'm a deer hunting man. Well, I'm a deer hunting man.
The Deer Society's success has been built on great partnerships with great product makers, such as Illusion Systems, maker of the Extinguisher Deer Call, the Black Rack Rattling System, and the Phase Body Odor System, Tacticam and Reveal, Osseo Gear, 10-Point Crossbows, Burris Optics, Huyman, and Big Frig.